Adoption of tentative budget, Monday, September 9th, 2019, 6 p.m. First thing is Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody would please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Sherry, you have some introductory remarks?
I do. I have, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, just have a minor change also to read in, I think, to the board, and it has to do with changes to your agenda tonight. And under item 4, I want to let everybody know that on the tentative millage budget adoption, section 3 of the resolution B-20-003 was updated to correct the fiscal year from 2018-2019 to fiscal year 2019-2020. And that's on item 4. Mr. Chairman, after that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it back over to you and Jan Brewer to begin tonight's hearing.
Great. Jan, have at it.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. So this is the first of 2 public hearings that are required by Florida statute. It's the truth and millage. This meeting was notified by the trim notice that everyone received. The second meeting will be a publication of advertisement in the newspaper, and that will happen next Monday. So the purpose of this first public hearing is, one, to discuss the proposed budget, FY20, turning it into the 20, and the tentative property taxes associated with it, to hear public comment, and then finally to adopt the proposed budget as your tentative budget for FY20 and millage rates, and then the next week we will move it from tentative to adopted. So the first item is for me to describe the percentage of additional property taxes that will be generated by the growth in the tax base, exclusive of growth from new construction. This is referred to as the increase in revenue over rollback rate or amount. In this budget proposal of Manatee County, while the overall tax rates are not increasing, the aggregate increase over rollback percentage is 4.1%, and the aggregate millage rate for FY20 is 6.8792, and the rollback aggregate rate of 6.6083. And now we'd like to provide you a new high-level view of the budget, which Port Manatee budget is also now included now, and we will go through. So on the screen, the first item that you see is a historic view of your property values. One of the things that's very interesting about this, I pulled back to see, because your Save Our Homes and the portability are capped. And the Save Our Homes especially are capped at 3% or the lower of CPI. So in the last 3 years, CPI has been 0.7, 2.1, 2.1, 1.9. So that's that line that you're seeing where after 2013, where it starts growing, most of that has come from new growth, not from your existing taxpayers. One of the things to notice, your total millage rate, that includes your countywide and your MSTU. As you can see, since 2014, it has been very steady and very flat. I appreciate that you have kept the millage where it's at. Actually, Sarasota County is upping their millage a little bit by 0.0419. So I'm very proud that Manatee is maintaining theirs. Moving to the next one, this is a good identification of what your millage rates are. Again, you have the county-wide at the first line with no change. The voted debt service, we left it there one more year. That expired last year, and it's no longer there, but some people do remember it being around. We just wanted to clarify that there is no voted debt service being charged. And in the unincorporated MSTU, it is 0.6109, no change there. Now, in addition to the unincorporated MSTU, you do have a Palm Air MSTU for landscaping. That has remained the same at 0.2546. We thought we would include this for you. Several years ago, when we started reviewing our revenues, we wanted to do a comparison of the revenue structure to us to other counties. So as you can see, this takes like-sized counties and also our neighbors and puts it in a comparison. So how you read this chart is the first half is dedicated to types that are property taxes. Those truly are based upon property, and they're classified as that. The second half is other taxes, which you can actually implement as a board. So to look at us, if you just look on a high level, Manatee is almost to the end, fourth from the right, in red, and you can see we do not have that many dots. We actually only have the countywide property tax millage, then the two MSTUs. I'm very proud. The last time we had this chart, we didn't have the infrastructure sales tax. And after everybody's efforts, that one, we do have the infrastructure sales tax on there. We also are at max capacity on our local option gas taxes. Most of the counties are on this chart as the same well. And the two that are missing at the bottom are the electric franchise fee and the stormwater fee. And the franchise fee is the ability for electric companies to pay you for running their lines through the right-of-ways. It's basically in having that franchise. The stormwater fee, again, most other counties have implemented that, but we haven't. As I said, I was looking at this in comparison, and that's when I looked to Sarasota, and it was very, very interesting. And also how they're allocating out their millages, because you can see quite a few different millages that they're taking advantage of that we haven't. But the one large difference I came across is that their taxable value is $62 billion, and our taxable value is 38. So quite a difference in where we're at. But with the increase that they are proposing in their budget this year, they'll actually have a $2.6 million increase coming in. So on the next slide, you have revenues by sources. As you can see, property tax represents 33.5% of your overall revenues that you receive. Now, this is reflective of your net budget. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to go around the pie. I like looking for the pie because for me, it's very clear where most of our revenue is coming from. It's coming from property taxes and then charges for services. Charges for services come in at 32.2% of every dollar we get in, and it ranges at $243 million. You can also see as you're going around other taxes, license permits and fees. Those are combining several different small categories. And then our intergovernmental revenue is 7.7% or $58 million. Flipping to the next page, so where do we use our funding? There's two areas that are the largest that you can see from this pie. Starting at the top left, public safety is at 26.1. I think I need to increase my bifocals. 26.1%. Public safety includes not only the sheriff, but also EMS, animal control, all of that area. The physical environment actually includes solid waste, utilities, and stormwater. That runs at 27.4% or $206 million. Transportation comes in next at 12.2%, $92 million. That includes your transportation department and transit. Human services is made up of neighborhood services, economic development, healthcare, nonprofit agencies, and also the children's services that we provide, and that makes up 4.4% of the budget, or $33 million. Culture and recreation involves parks, the civic, types of the library, economic environment, and then you have capital outlay of $40 million. And then there's the general government is up above at 11.7%, taking care of the basic remaining departments. So the total net budget for that is $757 million. Now with that, I don't know if anyone has any questions that they'd like to do. If we move forward, Jamie, we have a wonderful budget message that's online that we're suggesting all taxpayers refer back to. That is an excellent short summary of our budget overall. And then we have the next public hearing on the 17th. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions if anyone has.
Commissioner Whitmore.
Two things. First of all, can you go back to the slide? So there is a portion of our millage that goes for parks and recreation. We had separated that.
Yes, you
When
do.
did we do that? Last year?
Last year.
Okay, so now that people know part of where their taxes are going, it's more transparent, okay. Also, I'd like you to explain, when people see this money that's in our account, and I want you to go ahead and go through it now, the transportation, the stuff we have by law that we have to have in the accounts before we can start a project. If you could just go over that.
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity. So, the cash that you're referring to is that in our financial statements, the bank account is holding quite a bit of cash. Well, there's two things that happen. The first thing is that you have a reserve policy, and you actually say that 20% of all the expenditures that you spend for the year, you want to hold back that money in order to make sure that you have enough. And then you have a little bit of budget stabilization beyond that. So that's on the operational side of it, and that provides the cash that you have basically in reserves. Now, at the end of the year, what happens is when we budget, we take our best estimate of how much that will be, and we put that in your budget. So there's no money left outside the budget. And that's on the operations side. Now, on the capital project side, the clerk has required that when we let a contract, and when I mean let a contract, let's take a road. Road can be $10 million, it can be over 3 years. The minute we go out for the procurement and we sign the document, we have to have all of that cash in place. So that means the $10 million for this road has to be there on day one. You may not access it or write the first check for quite a while, but that $10 million is there. And of course, with road projects, they actually last over a couple of years. So what happens in the road projects, and especially the utility projects, you see large balances there, but they're obligated under the budget that they're set aside for specific appropriations that you have granted. When it translates over to the financial statements, though, those obligations that you have don't really show up. It just looks like you have a really big cash balance. But you have to marry the two and see what you've promised to spend the money on. And then that's where we have. But that's why we have those balances.
And two big projects, there's 3 projects I want you to mention because these are heavy hitters. During Hurricane Irma, we had to, and that reserves is what helped us with the pickup, if you could let the public know how much we spent on there. And also when our dam failed a few years ago, how much we spent on there that came out of our utilities reserves.
Correct. So the Irma that hit us, I believe it was around 17 million. Total was 17 million. Of that, 12 million of it was debris. So we were able to use the balances in the funds to go ahead and pay that back. Irma was a bit unique. They did not reimburse you for a year and a half.
Right, and we're getting reimbursed now.
Right. We've been reimbursed for quite a bit of the debris, so we're finally getting back. And the projects you're talking about, the dam project was 50 million. I can think of the ultrafiltration, that's also a large project. And we've actually had to even go out and bond and have all that money up front to have those.
So we have phase 2 yet still to do of the dam, because we know that was phase 1, and I'm not even sure what that was. Well, I need to ask these questions because the public. And the microfiltration, I've been involved with that since day one. How much is that costing? That's like,
I think it's right at 50 million. I mean, I may be quoting a little upper
that's for
below.
drinking water, and we're one of 3 in the country that will have this upgraded filtration system for our drinking water. Okay. And so we still have phase 2 to do of the dam, right?
Right, and Mike probably needs to update you more on the nuances of that, but yes, you still have quite a few projects. You actually have projects coming up in your CIP for utilities in 2021, almost 22, that you're gonna have to bond again to take care of those projects. Again, in order to have the money up front, in order to meet the
Exactly, because
qualifications.
these kind of monies we don't have, we'll have to bond it.
Correct.
But it has to be in the budget.
Correct,
And so we got to pay him back because our clerk requires that, correct?
correct.
Okay, thanks.
Let me, just for clarification, when you talk about having the money in basically LIP, which in
What's
the banking
LIP?
industry was loans in process.
Oh.
You were doing a construction loan. Is that a local requirement, or is that a state requirement that that money be
In place, that's the clerk's requirement.
The clerk.
Local is the clerk's
Oh,
requirement.
okay.
But it is required by DOT as well to have the money in place to fund a road, which is one of the reasons why it takes so darn long to get roads built, because they require the money to all be funded up front. And I know that because I was trying to argue for some projects to be sped up, and they won't do it unless you have the money.
I just want to clarify that for the public, because certainly in the banking
50%.
industry, you would never lend on a house
Not the whole thing.
unless the people
Right.
had all the money in the bank. You know,
And
we
the-
always made them the promise that we use their money first before we started charging interest on the
And then if I may,
big number.
and if I may, one of the things you've taken advantage of is using that credit line. So as long as we have the amount we can draw down, we're only drawing down what we need, but we have the availability to cover the contract, and that meets the thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, good.
Okay, Commissioner Benak?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I should have pointed this out. In the September 9th agenda, and I also saw it in the memorandum, under, and you can probably explain this, but this is under the aggregate millage rate comparison, and I know this is regards to the rollback. There's a 4.1, I think it's percent, it has a dollar sign also.
It does, it should have a percent. It
If
is,
you would explain that, because I know that's a question we frequently get during this budget hearing. If
Where
could
are you?
explain. I'm actually on the agenda, which is at the back of the, very back of the book for September 9th, on the next page where it says announce aggregate millage rate comparison, so.
so if you noticed, when I was telling you the total millage you used, it was 7.04 something. So let me explain what this does, because this is truly a trim calculation. So that first number, 6.8792, is basically calculated by taking the tax that you're gonna charge in each of the districts. So for you, that's the countywide, unincorporated, and the Palm Area MSTU. They add it all together, and then they divide that into just the countywide millage, which is different from the unincorporated millage, which is also value, taxable value, and it's also different from the Palm Air taxable value. But for trim calculations, that total tax that you're gonna receive is divided into the total taxable value, and it comes up with the 6.8792. So then what happens is you take it back to say, based upon last year's taxable value, what would that calculate out to be? So the difference between the two is a 4.1% increase between last year's operating millage rate, aggregate rate, and the new one.
And like you said, that increase in the amount of taxable
Value.
value is primarily due to new growth.
Yes, ma'am.
Because they start out where folks that are homesteaded have Save Our Homes more limited. And what is the percentage, what is the CPI this year? I know it has gone up from what it was.
It actually, it went down. It was 2.1 the prior year. This year it's gone to 1.9.
1.9, based on the CPI.
Yes.
So, okay, I knew it went up last year because it was really low the year before that.
0.7, yeah, 1 year it was 0.7.
So 1.9 is CPI. Thank you.
Commissioner Ball?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. I had sent an email requesting, today, I think, actually, how much money are we still owed from FEMA for the storms? Do we know?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Yeah, we do,
I
probably.
didn't send it to you, I'm sorry,
Okay.
Jan.
Okay,
It
that's
wasn't
okay.
sent to you, but,
I'm,
do we know?
yes.
You have to get on the
have to
mic.
You
come
have
up
to get
to
up
the
to the
microphone.
microphone. Sorry, honey.
So the one coming to the podium is Candy Cruz, and Candy has been in charge of the FEMA overall
That's been fun.
collections.
I, as Jan said, Candy Cruz with Financial Management. The original estimate that we were to receive is $17,678,909. To date, we've received $11,347,030.
Good.
Okay. They have a new guy that's in charge there. I heard it in my regional planning council meeting this morning. I can give you his phone number, and he says he wants all the counties reimbursed.
Nice.
So I'll give you that number so you can call him, because the money is sitting there waiting for us.
Perfect.
So
Yeah,
he
most
says.
of our projects have been obligated, and we're working on requests for reimbursements. The biggest project would be our beach erosion project.
All right, wait a minute, I'm sorry. So are you telling me that the FEMA reimbursement is already obligated for beach nourishment? Is that what you said?
Damage.
It
But
was
interesting.
obligated, yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. I'll send you his number
Okay.
tomorrow.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay? I heard that in my regional planning council meeting this morning. And also, I noticed, and of course, I understand that on what you presented to us doesn't show what we're looking at now as far as a stormwater fee and a mobility fee that we're looking at passing this year. So that's not on there. Do we have any idea how much revenue that might provide for us? Do we have any indication whatsoever right now what that might be?
Right, you'll know, we have that on your work session for the 17th, the most updated next Tuesday before the final budget adoption. The first work session in the morning is with utilities, and the second is with Public Works, and that's the stormwater. So you'll have more details before to study that over the weekend.
So we don't know how much that might increase the monies that we have per se for our budget.
Not
putting
in-
it loosely.
Yeah, not in total at this
Right.
point.
Okay, but it will obviously increase what our residents are paying. The stormwater fee and the mobility fee, if they're passed, will charge our residents more for these particular items. And these particular items, will they have a designated, in other words, will it be designated, the funds from these two? For the stormwater fee and the mobility fee, will those be designated as well? I see John coming forward.
They should be.
Plan.
I'll tell you why I'm asking.
Commissioner Johnson, Commissioners, John Osborne with County Administrator's Office. Sorry. When it comes to the mobility fee will be an update to your impact fee schedule, and that is in the works. We have a consultant actually working on that. You won't be seeing that. We just started the project, so we won't be seeing that till later this year, and likely it won't be effective until early next year if the board adopts it. But keep in mind, the mobility fee is an impact fee for transportation, so it's the monies you can spend on doing capacity added improvements to your roadway infrastructure, and those fees can only be used for those capital projects. It's not a maintenance anything. You can't fix a pothole with it. By the Florida Impact Fee Act, you're very handcuffed to what you can use it for and for how long you can use it. So it's a very, very strict funding source, but it is for adding capacity to the roadways. But it's not a fee
Are
that
you
can
talking
use
about
for-
the mobility fee is
Yes.
strictly for transportation?
The mobility fee would be, yes, ma'am, strictly for
Okay.
transportation projects.
And so that will only be paid by new homes that are built?
Any new business or new home, they would pay, it's just like your impact fees now. You would-
I'm
if
not
you-
moving my business, just so you
Okay.
know.
But if you built
I don't
something
want
new,
it.
if you built something new, you added a house, built a house, or added square footage to your business, or opened up built a new brick and mortar business, you are charged an impact fee consistent with our impact fee schedule. And there's a transportation component of that helps we put that money in the CIP to add roads in that vicinity and capacity of the intersections and things like that. That's what we use that money for.
Okay. And John, I don't know, you might be able to answer this next one, or either the young lady that was just up here. On the reimbursement from FEMA, will that money go into utilities where they could use that for the second phase of the dam work that needs to be done?
I can answer that. The money that was used, the largest part of what she quoted, about 11 million of it was debris. That came from the landfill. It went right back to the landfill.
So it'll go back to landfill, because I know they have some things that they're looking at doing as well. So it's nice to know that they're looking at getting that additional monies in, 11,300,000. Okay, so that will help utilities in that regard. Okay. Let me see if there's anything else that, I guess what I'm pointing at here is that, I had brought up reducing the millage. And I know we've gotten some emails from very influential people about not increasing the millage rate. I get it. I understand it. But I guess what I'm asking is when we do the stormwater fee, and I talked to Public Works about this last week, and we increase the mobility fee, we're hitting residents for an additional amount of money. Maybe not on the mobility fee, because if I understood John O correctly, that'll only be on new construction. But the stormwater fee definitely, from what I gather, every resident will have to pay the stormwater fee. So I'm trying to make sure that the residents are taken care of. And that concerns me because it's not cheap. It's about $130 a year per home that they're going to be charged on the average. And I get it. We need it. I mean, stormwater is an issue. And home or water quality is an issue. But with all the additional monies that we have, and I never did get the report, by the way, that I had asked for, where it showed the departments with the 20%, thing with the extra money that each department had. I never got that report where it showed I didn't know, not what I was asking for. I didn't get it. And that's okay. I mean, I'm sure I will. But, the ones that had the 20% revenue put aside, and then I wanted the actual figure that each department has. And I know some of that money's designated. I understand that. But I wanted to know how much was not designated, because I know there is monies there that aren't designated. So I was trying to get a better picture, and I'm not talking about anybody in the in the audience. I'm just trying to figure out really where we are. Because I don't want to increase any funds on the residents that they have to pay if it's not really warranted. And I'm concerned about that. The dam, I know Commissioner Whitmore brought that up. God knows we need it. I mean, I get it.
We don't have a choice.
That needs to be done. But I also know it's going to be bonded. So yes, we have to have some of the money ahead of time. I get it. I've been on this board for almost 8 years. I understand that. But I just need to make sure that what we're doing is not putting more of an impact on the residents than what truly is needed. Because I think we need to remember when we're up here and we're looking at the monies that are being paid in and the monies that we're paying out, and I get it, we have a lot of issues. I mean, I was in a meeting today where we talked about it, and but I just want to make sure that the residents are being represented fairly and not being charged for more. And I'll tell you what bothers me the most, why I'm on this so hard, and you guys know me. I mean, when I look, we all heard last year about Longboat Key and Sarasota County, and how they said that our fees were so much higher than what theirs were. Well, that's not entirely true, is it? Because, they have the healthcare levy from the hospital. They have a stormwater fee.
Right.
They have a mobility fee. They have impact
Environmental.
fees. And, I've looked into that greatly. But I just want to make sure that in saying that, because that's going to come up this year, and we're going to have to defend our county against it with Longboat Key, we need to make sure that we're really being above board and fair to our residents. And that's why I'm really harping on this, commissioners. It's not that I'm trying to be difficult, but, I need more information, I think. I need that report, because I just want to make sure that the citizens understand and know that no matter what this board votes, and there's been several times, the budget's come before us in the past years, I didn't vote for it because I didn't agree with how the monies were spent. Sherry Corrier is the best ever, and she's got my total support, and so does Jan. But I'm just trying to make sure that now that we're being above board, that the citizens understand where we are and why. And if there's something that we can change to give the citizens a break, I truly think we need to. They deserve it. We've hit them pretty hard. Even though we've kept the millage the same, I understand that, but you know what? I live in Manatee County, the same as all of you. And, you know, yeah, you can keep the millage the same, but you know what? The tax bills go up. And it's because of the values, the properties go up. And that is something that we never take into consideration. So I guess my last question, Jan, is how much, if you can, I don't know if you can even tell me, Jan, maybe this is too much to ask, but because of the increase of the values in Manatee County of the homes, how much additional revenue or is Manatee County going to see from that? Do we know?
4.1.
Can I clarify? Because I just want
Yeah.
to make sure I'm understanding.
Okay.
If we know, and I can get you the figure for the change in the property values between the 2 years, and it identifies the new construction within it. So I think I'm missing.
Okay, I'm not talking about necessarily just the new construction. We have a lot of needs. I mean, our sheriff is here. He has huge needs because of the growth that we've seen in the county, and I understand that. But at the same time, our revenue is increasing, not because we've increased the tax bill, because we haven't per se, the millage rate. But it is increasing simply because the home values are now going back up again. So approximately, I guess to ask it in an easier way, and I don't know if this is fair, Jan, you'll have to help me. But because of the increase in the home values, how much of an increase in revenue is the county seeing just from last year to this year?
7.6% based upon.
How many millions is that?
I
I don't know. You gotta help me.
200. Hang on 1 second, and I can tell you.
Yeah, I figured you could. I don't know. I mean, that's above my pay grade.
Was it on that first slide, Jan, where you
Yeah.
had the totals from 2006?
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Right there.
That's-
So,
That's the
But now
property
that's the
values.
property values, and I believe what I'm hearing you're asking is what is the change in the taxable value?
I want to know how much more money the county is receiving from last year to this year because of an increase in revenue,
Property
because of property values.
Okay, if you can hang on 1 second, I can get you that
And I'm
number.
sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult. But I think that's important.
It's right at 18.8 is the difference between the adopted 19 values that we had in there and where we're at now.
18.8 million?
18.8 million.
18.8 million
million.
more this year
Oh, wait.
than in 18. Is that fair? Wow, that's a lot of money. Okay, I'm done. Thank you. I'll come back later.
Okay,
Wow.
a quandary here. I got John Barnott.
John Barnott.
That must be Jan, that must be
Green.
Jan.
I
That must
assume
be
maybe
me.
that's you,
That was Jan.
followed by Sarah Shank.
That must be me.
See her, so I assume.
I'm Sarah, I bet.
Chris, good job.
I bet I'm Sarah. I bet I'm
That's
Sarah.
okay.
Thinking about the land use.
Do you want to go first?
I was just gonna add to, the discussion, when we rolled out the budget, we just, we did anticipate that we'd have some questions about, the change in the additional values, and as Jan just mentioned, looking about a 7.6% increase. One of the things I'd remind you is that, the budget that we presented, the balanced budget that we presented, had about 19.2 million, added for funding for service levels out of a request of 37.2 million overall. So there was still a very wide gap of things that we did not address or fund based on concerns over changes and trying to meet the level of service. That was a challenge. We tried to make sure that we could meet the level of service, and we thought we made a good step forward, at least to
You
do that in
absolutely
this
did.
year.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Barnott, what you want to say?
one of the things, first, I wanted to make sure that you realize we're not trying not to give you something. The way our system is set up is the 20% is calculated on funds, not departments. And I can give you a perfect example. The general fund has public safety within it, property management. It also has my department, county admin. those aren't calculated by the 20% on there, it's the fund as a whole. However, some funds are directly related only to certain departments. Utilities have their own funds that are specific to them. So we sent something on 8/20 that talked about the stabilization reserves. What I'll do is go back and I'll make sure I can put, if there is a department directly related to it, I'll put that step in there, and I apologize for not listing that. So I'll go back and make sure I do that.
Okay,
Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman,
Benak.
can I respond to Jan, please, on what she just said? Would you mind? I apologize. I know I'm stepping in. I want to make this very clear. Jan Brewer and Sherry have been fabulous. I mean, you guys have done more, and I'll guarantee you there's some department heads out here that would agree with me. You guys have done so much more than we have seen in the last 7 years that I've been on this board. You know what? You took the revenues, you took the surplus that was there, and you put it to use. You guys were awesome. Okay? And don't think that I'm finding fault with either one of you. God knows I love you both. You have been a blessing. Okay? So I didn't want you to take anything that I said in the wrong way, because honestly, it was not meant that way.
Oh, no,
Okay?
thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure.
I just want you to know that. I mean, it is not in any way meant toward either one of you. You guys have been terrific. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Benak.
Yeah, this is good conversation, and I'm glad we've clarified the mobility fees are in fact a replacement in many ways for impact fees. They may not replace them entirely, but it is totally an impact fee, which is not paid by existing residents of the county. It is paid by new growth. And the reason for looking at mobility fees, and like you said, we're not gonna do them this year, is because of the limits that state law put on what you can spend impact fees on. Fees have a much broader range, but that's
Than
really.
impact fees.
Yeah, than impact fees, but that's really something that's paid by new growth, to make new growth pay for its own way. The stormwater fee is also not gonna be assessed this year.
Right.
There's no way that it could be assessed this year. In conversations, we are going to have a work session on September 17th, where we're gonna talk about, you know, what the proposed stormwater fee, you said a number, that's not a number I had heard, in my briefing, so I,
number?
you said $130 a year or something like
Oh,
that?
that was in every,
That was in my briefing.
Okay,
It was a
there's some
presentation.
ranges, I know there's
Yeah, it
some
was in my
ranges
briefing that I
depending
had
on
with
the
Public
level of
Works.
service
It was a
that might be
guesstimate, yeah.
proposed, but, again, when I had my briefing today, I said, well, stormwater fees today are largely paid out of solid waste.
Yeah.
Right?
They all are.
So, the
all are.
residents, we're all paying
Phosphate.
for stormwater in a different way. So,
Yes.
should there be a trade-off? Maybe, but that's gotta be part of the
Agreed.
discussion. So
Agreed.
I don't want people to think that this budget in front of us is not showing what you're gonna be paying this year. It is. I think the answer on the 1.9% CPI, again, yeah. If you look at your tax bill and you're
Save our homes.
Save Our Homes, homesteaded resident is the word I was looking for, homestead, resident of Manatee County, your bill would not have gone up by more than 1.9% maximum.
Correct.
3%
So,
total.
Maximum 1.9 or 3%, whichever is lower, so it's 1.9. So I think that's factual. In terms of the budget stabilization, I was looking, because you did send a memo showing us by fund how much budget stabilization money is. And I think that is, I call it the Mike Meehan factor, that is the money that is out there in excess of the 20%, right? So it is a hefty number. I mean, it's not low, but we're not, how do we compare to where we were when we started using the budget stabilization fund in 2007? I don't know if I got the year right, but
You're
roughly.
Still considerably less. I want to say they started around 50 million with the
right.
stabilization, and you're at I believe around 17, almost 18 million now. But that's a very good healthy point.
Yeah, And no doubt, I mean, that, you know, it's a pro, when I discuss this with people, it's a pro and a con that we have this additional funding available, given things that happen that we don't foresee. But you don't want to have us relying on a whole lot of money that is just stored away, when in fact, we are taking it out of people's pockets. There's no doubt about it, including mine. So I think that is an issue for us continued discussion, but as I said at the last meeting, that we have a lot of challenges that we're going to be facing, and some of you know that I attended the event today at lunchtime. It was put on to discuss climate change, and I mean, it was probably one of the more depressing sessions that I've ever attended. But, you know, reality is we've got a lot of major challenges. And unfortunately, people do look to local government to solve some of those changes. And I say unfortunately because I'm not sure we can resolve all of those. But to me, that was the reason not to do a tax cut at this time. But I will also tell you, and I don't disagree with this statement, that when we look at an increase, we should be looking at the money that we have on hand and not necessarily increasing if we have adequate money on hand. Somebody's gonna have to convince me that there is a true need for that additional money and what that is. So I think that is the challenge as we go forward with the stormwater fee, so. But it is laid out in our budget message where this money is going. 20 new sheriff office deputies. That includes a long list that we worked out with the sheriff's office, and yeah, their needs are growing with the population. That's just how it is. But our needs are growing too. Public safety department, 6 additional paramedics. You know, we have to keep pace with that. There's everything else is broken
You
up.
heard that?
What's that?
Thundering.
Yeah, I got it.
Always, of course.
I hope I wasn't talking.
His Bluetooth is outside now.
What did I do? All right, I'll shut up. I don't know. You guys are making.
Okay, you know, I'll just give my 2 cents. You know, I haven't been up here but 2.5 years, but I've been around for a while. You know, there's no question that I think going back to the days of Ernie Pageant, you know, and Chip Shore, that this county's been run really conservatively financially. That was something, so what you're talking here is really a philosophical difference. You know, I mean, like we say, to me, you've got this 20% reserve fund, you've got a stabilization fund. This year, we're also adding in a disaster relief fund. And then we're gonna come back and we're gonna say, okay, now we all are gonna hit you up with a 1.4% utility increase. And then, oh, by the way, we got a stormwater fee we're gonna come in with too. You know, so, you know, I mean, that kind of concerns me, like how much is enough type of thing. And we wanna be, you know, obviously prepared for the disaster. But, you know, that's just been, this is I think a board level philosophical discussion that would have to go on as to what is enough, you know, to sit there and protect us from some, you know, I mean, we all talk about a recession, but if, you know, if you listen to, you know, the news, they're like, well, we don't see any recession, whether you're listening from the Federal Reserve people going, things, you know, looking good, then, you know, you hear the other people saying, oh no, we're gonna, you know, have a recession and this and that, and, you know, that's just kind of part of the economic cycle that goes up and down. But I think, you know, just from where I sit, you know, I'm like, you know, I think we're in pretty good shape. You know, we have a good budget this year. You know, we're gonna sit there and do a nice, I think, what I have been pushing for, a good bond issue. And I think, you know, interest rates are really low. We'll have a further discussion on the timing of it based on, you know, projections as to where the Fed's gonna take interest rates, we think, over the next 3 or 4 months as to when we need this money. Again, you know, we kind of get our hands tied with having to fund all these projects up front. So we immediately have a negative interest spread because we're paying, according to the projections today on the $70 million bond issue memo that I saw, they're talking in the 4.5% range. We're gonna earn 1% on it. And I'm going, well, there's 3.5% negative, you know, disintermediation, you know, on $70 million is not to me, chump change, at the end of the day. So, but on the other hand, our policy is to fund these things and have the money in the bank. We know they need to get done. I think the county, being conservative as it has been for so many years, we're now paying for it, if you will, and that's why we got,
No, it's conservative.
now that's why we've got the half-cent sales tax got passed, and, we have, I think it's good, Sherry and Jan, to me, have done a great job this year, because we're gonna go out and spend some of this money, and we're gonna sit there and be able to show the citizens that, finally, we're gonna give them something for their dollar type of thing, and, so I think, it's a discussion that's gonna be ongoing, but, whether, it's not gonna get done tonight, but I think, what we have, is a good starting point, and then, again, I think the board philosophically will just say, hey, where do we really think we need to be, from a big picture standpoint, because that's really our job up here, is to try to have a vision as to where we are and where we want to go. But I think we're in just, spectacular financial shape right now where we're at. It's just, again, we've done it maybe at taxpayers' expense, and at what point do you sit there and keep hitting up the taxpayer, for more and more fees, knowing that we need them, but at the same time, maybe we need to, shrink down our cash reserves and use some of that money to do some of the stuff or not. But again, to me, that's a policy decision that we'd have to make, and I know Sherry and Jan will give us more than enough information, to try to ultimately make that decision down the road. So, anyway, that's my two bits. Commissioner Whitmore?
After this, and then I know we want to open up to the public comment, but I spoke to the clerk of the court, and I'm sure you all have too. They recommend strongly that we do not go below, they recommend we keep our 20%. Because what it is when we go out and bond now, our rating is so good that we don't have to borrow the money or pay them the money, because they give it to us without having to have that money in the bank, correct?
Correct.
And that's our saving grace. So I don't support doing anything different, but you're the banker in the private sector. I'm going with what the clerk of the court say, and not Sherry or Jan. I'm going with the people that manage our money. Property values, first of all, the stormwater utility fee. I live in Holmes Beach, and I've been paying it for years, and my tax bill, I pay $81 a year. Now that, if this ever gets passed, you won't be this won't be tacking on to the cities, the incorporated cities, right? It's just the unincorporated.
Yeah.
So whatever we're paying now, because my city's talking about raising them too. We just did a drainage study where I live in Holmes Beach, and they're looking at increasing ours. But again, it's a year-long study. Then they have to go through every property and assess it. And I have a very large house on a small lot, so I pay one of the higher amounts, believe it or not. The dam, I heard comments about the dam. For phase 2, is it true, even if we bond it, we don't have to have the money in the account, correct? Because of our credit rating. Do we have to have the money in a line item to do phase 2? Do you know?
Yes, you would.
Still do?
Yes,
So
you
if we
would.
borrow it, it's still got to be in an account.
Not all of it.
You did,
Yeah.
right. I think what I was alluding to before is that we went out and got a credit line and said as long as we can draw on that, the
Okay.
clerk was satisfied it met her needs.
Okay.
So technically, if you use the credit line, you only draw what you need, but you're setting aside a piece of that credit line for that project.
Got it.
Same concept.
I
And
think,
seriously,
Carol, you're a little confused between the credit line that we're talking about redoing, Angel's okay as long as we have the credit line, that we don't need it.
and she says the only way to have that credit line is to have the 20% reserves, is what she's told me.
Well, that'd be up to the bank issuing the credit line.
Yeah, that's
But
what they recommend.
The bond, once you issue the bond, you got the money, baby.
Right, yeah, you're
know?
right.
Well,
It comes
Oh, wait,
on.
Jan's not
It comes
agreeing.
in.
Jan's not agreeing.
That and the payment.
Maybe in the private sector. Did you want to address his before I go
yeah,
on?
if I could. One of the things, we just got through bond calls, so as we're going to issue this debt, and I'll come before you tomorrow and give you a complete report, But as you go through these bond calls, both rating agencies, I can tell you, it was right around the time Dorian was hitting up the coast. One of the things they commended you on was that you did set aside a storm reserve, to address a hurricane. They both commended on that. And then one of the comments that they made was that as this storm is passing, they have a list of cities and counties they're going back and calling, because then they have to go back and make sure that they have the correct cash flow and the ability to maintain during the disaster. And they can go through and devalue their ratings as they go through. It's not the most happy thing that they do, but they said that it was. But they commended us that we were trying to address it, and they also complimented Manatee in that when we went down in the hard times, we still had positive balance sheet items. Other cities and counties, they said, were far between. So they were very complimentary on that.
And my last comment was Sarasota, 2 or 3 years ago, they didn't balance their budget, and by law, you have to balance your budget, correct? So they were 6 million and change in the hole, and I don't know how they resolved it, but they were in the process of getting a new administrator. Tom went to Lombard Key, but they were 6 million in the hole. And also, this year, they were gonna build a convention center, and then their lift station in Bee Ridge, and their stormwater issue, which we don't have that, thank God, but that's why we're looking at the stormwater utility fee. But I read in my little DEP thing that I get every day about the spills, in that Bee Ridge lift station, it's been 76 million gallons in the last month or two. We all get dailies, including Manatee County, everywhere else where there's issues. So they've redirected that money, and I think they're gonna put 137 million. That's why they're raising their millage, because they have this major issue on Bee Ridge on this lift station. We don't have that. And we have a reserve, and I don't know what Sarasota does with their budget. They have all these different fees, but they were short one year, 6 million in your budget. I've never even heard of that before. Because by law, you have to have a balanced budget, correct? And we do have a balanced budget on this, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
Okay,
Can't wait.
again, I have these strange names.
Oh, is Sarah back?
I can't wait.
Oh, goodness. Well, just in a few little notes in closing for me is that I had them back up the polka dot chart, and I know you saw it, but one of the concerns, obviously, that we had about Jan and I working together this year to kind of hold the line, but then increase our service levels because of, 80,000 new people since 2008. Probably another 8,000 or 9,000 this year. We don't have the numbers for that, but it's keeping that service level, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, moving up with what the services are. But the fear is that, again, when Jan's mentioning to you reports about the different funds that we have revenues coming in, the general fund is taking the hit for all of these things that we don't have separate fees for. So when you look at this polka dot chart and you don't see a stormwater fee and you don't see another fee, that's coming out of the general fund, which means that any of those departments, when Jan will show you which ones are pulling off the general fund, those departments will never be able to provide a service level as if we continue to pull all those expenditures off of the general fund. So one of our goals this year, Jan and I, was to look and continue to try to find where we can improve service. So when you see your work session details, especially on the stormwater, next Tuesday, you'll see some projections of what can be done. It's about 13 million, a little over 13 million right now that's spent out of about 3 different funds, utilities being the highest. But as was indicated, there would be about a 2-year lag before any of that will change, no matter what you adopt, meaning your general fund is going to continue to be drawn from to take care of all these other services. So we're trying to plan ahead for you in that regard. And we appreciate the confidence that you're having in presenting this, and hopefully we're answering some of your questions, especially for the citizens too.
Okay, I think we're probably ready for public comment.
I'm on the board. I'll try. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay. Real quick, because I've been told I have to hurry this up. I know I keep hearing about a recession. I heard about it today in my meeting with the Planning Council. Jobs are up, stock market's up. All the signs right now are not that we're having a recession. Yes, we definitely could. It is time for one. It's normally about every 10 years, but so far we're not seeing it. I don't think anyone ever said anything about the 20% revenue balance that we have. We need to keep that. A lot of the departments, it's required by Florida statute that we have a 20% balance. Also, the budget. We have to have a balanced budget. We always do. So, I don't know why those things were mentioned because they're irrelevant. I mean, it's things that we do. We have to do them. We have to have the 20% fund. We have to have a balanced budget. Those are things that this board has always done. And by the way, no two people have ever, and staff, by the way, I should say, has ever worked so hard on a budget as these two women have on this budget. There is no doubt in my mind. I've seen it. But at the same time, as I said, my concern is we're going to be hitting the citizens for more money. So by doing that, since revenues are up $18.8 million, it just seems like we could, perhaps give them a little bit of a break to help make up for the additional revenues that this board's going to ask them to make later in the year. That's all I'm saying. Let me see, what else is there? Well, we talked about the recession. We're not seeing any of that at this point. Okay. The 20% overage we need to have by law. Most of the departments require that. Florida statute. We have it. I've talked to the clerk's office myself, and we have exactly what they need. We actually have more than what they need. Do they want us to keep as much money in our reserves as possible? Absolutely. It gives us a AAA rating. They don't want us to lose that. Why would they? But at the same time, that being said, it's not something that is written in stone. Does it help our bond or our interest rates? Yes. But once that bond is done, it's done. I think perhaps we need maybe an education, all of us, on this because, once you get that bond, your interest rate's not going to change. I mean, it is what it is. So I don't know. I'm just saying that, yes, we have our 20% in most of our departments. Yes, there is more that the sheriff needs because of growth. Yes. And he has had a hard time in the 7 years I've been on this board. This has been the easiest budget that any of us have ever experienced that's up here. We got two new commissioners who aren't here tonight, but man, they had a breeze for their first budgets. I'm envious because I surely haven't had it. So I admire these two women with what they've done. And I know that, yes, what I'm talking about could possibly take a little bit of money away from the general fund, and I get what the administrator has talked about, because some of the items that we do cover comes out of the general fund. A lot of it doesn't. So that's all I'm saying. We just need to be fair and open to the public, and I am looking forward to public comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, we will open it up to public comment. The first person I have is Dr. William Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Good evening. I'm here to speak on Dr. William Carlton of Lakewood Ranch. I'd like to speak in terms of supporting the library. And I know that people think it's a place of dusty books and it's irrelevant, but it's decidedly not that. It's a great resource. And so my concern is the planning and, of course, the budgeting of it. And there's a hole in this plan, it seems to me, and that is there's no philanthropy. There's no piece for philanthropy. And I think that could be an important part of financing a library that's distinctive and adequate for the future. And all of these programs are about the future. So I think the philanthropy piece is important. From my experience with these projects for 45 years, lately I've found that with new library construction, often communities provide $1 million to $2 million at least in philanthropy. Sarasota and this surrounding area has 50 years of distinctive philanthropic performance. I would think that this would be a great opportunity for the library to gain some of that appreciation. There's other reasons that I think the philanthropic piece is important. First of all, it helps spread the news and spread the facts regarding this facility so that we can cultivate those who should know exactly what the plan is and what the result will be. I think secondly, libraries have difficulty with their budgeting annually, and this is customary throughout the United States. So many libraries depend upon their annual giving and events to keep their socks up. And what these projects do is create a constituency that you're going to need to create anyway later. So it's going to be helpful in that. Thirdly, it's going to be helpful for the future in terms of plan giving and estate giving. And folks are pulled at the sleeve by their universities and hospitals, but it's important that also that this library would have the opportunity to begin those conversations and to gain that support. Again, it's for the future. Thank you very much.
If you could just hold on, I've got a couple commissioners I think I want to address your.
I don't.
Oh, Commissioner I'm sorry, Commissioner Ball.
No, not now.
Oh,
Until
I'm
after
sorry.
Public comment. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Doctor.
Yes.
Okay, next person, Ernie Marshall. Welcome back.
Yeah, because I want to mention.
North Carolina was good.
Yeah, that's where he was.
With those storms coming in, I'm almost sorry I did leave. First of all, I want to thank you. For the record, I'm Ernest Sandy Marshall, First Vice President of the Federation of Manatee County Community Associations. And I'm not sure if you need this for tonight or not, but I got 5 names here before I start. Are you doing that tonight? I need about 10 minutes.
You need a lot of time?
I need about 10 minutes. Hopefully I can get done in less. First of all, I want to compliment the comments I've heard from the board about the budget. As you know, the Federation for the past 12 years has attended workshops and given you a recommendation, and we would stand on that. I would urge you to look at it carefully, because some of the points about being conservative, about what you do because you've got money coming in and you've gotten rid of a big bond that you had, $32 million. Let's just not get out of line with violating conservative principles of how you keep that bond rate up by keeping reserves. What goes up must come down. So the bottom line is pay attention to what we put in that letter about preserving. My main purpose for being here tonight was not to talk about what you've already talked about, but it is something that struck me when I was figuring out if I was going to survive Dorita, what they call that?
Dorian.
Arena? Yeah.
Dorian.
Well, I've been here since 1951, and I've seen every storm that you've had and been in all of them. And I can tell you, it gave me pause to think with that pointed at the lower end of Florida, and it suddenly made that right turn. And so I thought about what happened last year. Before it turned, by the way, it flattened the Bahamas. Last year, we had Irma come right up through the middle of the state and was on our side of the state, And it left, what, 12 tons of debris that had to be paid for and cleaned up, not to mention all the damage. And then we had that storm called Michael that flattened the panhandle. Now, it's not a question of if it's going to happen, but it's a question of when. And we've got, when I was first here, when I was 16 years old in 1951, we had 23,000 people. We're up to 500,000 people. Sarasota County's got 600,000 people. Fort Myers has got 800,000. Tampa Bay's got millions of people up there. And one of these storms, like these two storms we talked about, hit, and people try to get on I-75 to get out of here, they're not going to be able to. And there's no question that trying to outrun a storm like what you've seen is not a really good idea. So we're going to have to hunker down in this county. And my pitch tonight is that we need to think about how to have three questions answered. One, where in the budget is it providing for adequate funding to provide safety shelters in Manatee County in the event of storms and flooding and damage from storms like these two we talked about? Secondly, what has been done by the county commission to join forces with Manatee County school boards to immediately harden these schools or help and figure out a solution, a methodology of how to do this? Because those are the best places that you can go for safety with all the facilities they have. But it's got to be a combination of both this board and that board working together. Also, the third question is, if nothing is being done by the county and staff to plan for resolving these questions, when are we going to do it, and why is it not being done? Because all this talk about putting in all these structures and things that you want to do are not going to mean anything if one of these storms cranks up and comes through here and does what it did to Panama City and the Bahamas. Now, the facts are that I think that there is ways that we can do something about coming up with a plan. And I hadn't planned to be here tonight, so what we're going to do is we're going to get a letter together and set out for you ideas of how you can go ahead and put a structure together to fund this idea of shelters so that we can enjoy all the great things we want to do with all this money we got after it's spent. But if we're not here and we can't stay here, it's not going to mean anything. We'll get that to you. There has got to be some ideas of how to raise the money. Would be, as an example, would be immediately begin collecting 100% impact fees and take the monies that we're not collecting now and put it into a disaster fund to harden shelters. The second thing would be amend the county's list to require portions of the sales tax collected under the sales tax initiative to include something for storm shelters. Thirdly, utilize and harden public buildings and other, even private buildings that can be used for shelters. And then lastly, require all new subdivisions that have community buildings being constructed and these new develops, require them to be hardened and elevated. So if the people living in those subdivisions have to leave their homes for safety, they can go there. So these are some of the examples of things that can be done to improve the situation involving how do we protect ourselves from these storms so that we can enjoy all the things that you want to spend that money on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Okay, next up, Mike Meehan.
Sounds good, but we can't do it.
Mike Meehan, citizen, Manatee County. Just a couple points on the conversation so far tonight. I actually went through my property assessed valuation since 2015, and it's up 7%. So that's been the tax increase since 2015, based on the 1.9% CPI number. Putting that in perspective. Thing about stormwater and sewer and water. Through July 31st of this year, first 10 months of fiscal 2019, sewer and water's got a profit of $39.5 million. That's how much they've collected versus what they've spent. They're up 39.5, and the stormwater expense is 5.5 million, first 10 months, fiscal year 19. So sewer and water can easily absorb stormwater expense on its own. There's no need to put a stormwater tax on. In 2018, fiscal year 2018, 14.6% of the total revenues that Manatee County collected went into a money market fund. How do I get that number? Well, we had a profit of 108 million and you collected 739 million. So dividing those two, the profit divided by the revenue, 14.6% of the money that Manatee County collected last year, fiscal year 18, went into a money market fund. It's not being used. I'm projecting another surplus for fiscal year 2019. Through the first 10 months of fiscal year 2019, there's a $163 million surplus, revenues over expense. Same time last year, there was a $126 million surplus for fiscal year 18. So the fact that the surplus is even higher for this year than last year, and last year we had a $108 million surplus, it's telling me we're going to have another $100 million surplus. Unrestricted cash at July 31st was $623 million. Manatee County in fiscal year 18 spent $631 million. So you have almost a 12-month reserve in unrestricted cash. Now that figure may go down between now and the end of the year, but you still got probably at least a 10-month reserve in unrestricted cash. So if you're worried about a 20% threshold, you've got a lot more than that. You've got almost a 100% threshold in unrestricted cash. Finally, the statement is made, well, we need these reserves for capital spending. You've had capital projects over $100 million for each of the last several years, and yet the reserves haven't gone down. Why haven't they gone down? Because you've covered your capital spending with your current revenue. And as a result, your reserves have gone from $291 million to $623 million. So the reserves are just growing. They're not being spent. Capital spending and budget are all being covered by revenues collected during the fiscal year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Ken Mattson? Ken here?
Are you Ken? No, I'm not Ken. Oh, he's not Ken.
The last name is Mattson.
His last name's Mattson.
Oh, Michael. Sorry.
He can't read. Doctor's right.
Look at Ken.
Thank you for your time, Commissioners. My name is Michael Mattson. I'm a resident of Manatee County. After being helped and perhaps a little bit educated out front before I came in, this might be the wrong forum for this question, but I've been trying to get a response and hadn't been getting one. The expenditures for operations at GT Bray, I can't get a clear answer as to why specifically the dive well cannot be repaired. I know it's a difficult operation, but I just couldn't get an answer for that. And it brought to mind, actually, to me, again, it's the wrong form for the Lincoln Pool, but in reading some of the previous minutes of meetings, it was asked, are these operating expenditures, is this maintenance expenditures? And it seemed to be a gap there. And I would hate for something that for that area especially, that is such a nice idea of the Lincoln Pool, and you guys are going forward with that we have operating expenditures in place for normal staff, personnel, things of that nature. But if something breaks, it sits for a year until we can figure out how to fix it. So specifically, I came for the answer on the dive well itself. I have an investment in it with my son and some of his friends that dive, and now they can't. So we're doing what we can with dry board practice and going up to Brandon on Saturdays for an hour or two of practice, trying to compete so that they can go on to districts and regionals. But it's a shame that that's the only place where we can do it in our county, and those kids can't do it anymore. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now, Ken Piper.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name's Ken Piper. I live in Parrish. First of all, I want to congratulate you for an excellent job. No matter what you come up with in a budget, everybody or somebody's going to criticize you because everybody has different ideas about how things should be run. I'd just like to ask you to seriously consider giving the taxpayers a break. And if you cut the millage by $0.5 let's say, that would give the taxpayers somewhere around $19 million back. On a $300,000 home, that would mean a savings of $150. $200,000 home, a savings of $100, and a $100,000 home, a savings of $50. So now, anybody can come up with an idea like that, so where's the money going to come from to give them that? And I think a lot of people have already, including the commissioners, have already suggested where some of it come from. Now, I tried to understand how much there are in reserves right now. And the only document that I found was an attachment to tonight's agenda that suggested somewhere around $600 million. And I don't know how much of that might be encumbered and how much would be unencumbered. But let's just say we took $10 million from that. We're almost halfway there to meeting the $19 million that we need to give the taxpayers a break. Now, we've got a couple of proprietary functions that the county performs. One is their transit system, which basically operates at a $15 million a year loss. I mean, we could do something maybe to get the fares up on that, treat it more like a business, go out and try to sell more advertising. I think they've got about $75,000 in advertising now. The same thing would apply to the convention center. Rather than worrying about making up a $15 million shortfall that you need to make up for to improvements that have been apparently at least partially neglected, let's try to make that more of a profit-making enterprise. And if we can't do it on either one of them, then maybe we should consider giving them up. Another area is the budget stabilization. It's up by $7.5 million this year over last year. And then I noticed the projections for next year are that it goes down again. So I just suggest we add that into our possibility of where the money's going to come from. Now, you've set up a new reserve for disaster recovery for $6.5 million. I don't know why we didn't do this in years past, but I think maybe we should reconsider whether or not we really need all of that. Anyway, if we add all of these up, there's about a $42 million basket of funds where we could afford to give the taxpayers about $19 million and give them the half-meal break that I talked about. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Darrell Johnson?
Good evening. My name is Darrell Johnson, and I live just over here off the river. And thank you for having me up. I'm here to ask for tax relief myself. So, looking at the numbers just for my property, it has went up between 2013 and 2018. It has went up 10.4% each and every year on an average. And for this year, because I sold my home in Tennessee and I already had a home here, when I got back, they told me it was going to be 17.6% for this year. So when I went over to the property appraiser's office today, they told me I tripped something because I had reinstated my homestead, and that was the reason that they believe it. But they were going to investigate it to make sure that's really what it was. So, it's kind of worrisome that you've got 600 million in surplus, and once again, I don't know what it's going to be used for. And I understand you have a 20% that you need to keep on the books just so you can get anything done around here as far as roadways goes. But it does seem like it would be a good time. I mean, just because you can raise property taxes doesn't mean you really have to every year. And I will say during the decline when we were dropping, because I've had the house since 2004, I noticed it went down a lot slower than it went up when things were looking good. And I realized that you had things funded, the county did, and had to pay for those things. And of course, it would be ridiculous to, yank the rug out from underneath you so you can get anything done as far as the property taxes go. But on the other side of that coin, it would be nice to get a little break every now and then. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else in the public that would like to come down and speak at this point? Seeing nobody from the public, we will close public comment. First on the board is Commissioner Ball.
Yeah, just a few comments about things that citizens said regarding impact fees. Where's Mr. Marshall? Did he leave?
Yeah, he left.
That's too bad. I wished he'd stayed. The things that he mentioned as far as hardening, we can't spend impact fees on that. Impact fees are highly regulated by the state.
Right.
So unfortunately, that's not an option for us when it comes to hardening shelters. And the other thing is, the money, I can tell you, we've looked at this board has looked at this very closely. And last year, when we went to Tallahassee and DC, we lobbied strongly for help in hardening shelters. It is a very, very, very expensive endeavor. I can tell you that the money that the county has today, if we tried to harden the shelters, we wouldn't have enough money. According to, and commissioners, correct me if I'm wrong on this, I think I'm right, as I recall, when it comes to the schools, when building new schools, this came up. The school board does not have to pay for hardening shelters. Am I correct on
Right.
this? That falls back on the county because we were outraged that they were building new schools that they were not going to harden. And I think what happened on that is that there was one that they were hardening. Am I correct on that? Okay. I just wanted to make sure. That's how I remembered it, but I wasn't sure. Talking about the budget stabilization fund and the disaster fund, I will tell you that the disaster fund is a new fund that our new county administrator and Jan Brewer came up with in the budget this year. We've not had that in the past. I think it's a very good thing to have because we don't know when we might truly need it with the storms that we're seeing today. I have relatives in Norfolk, Virginia, in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I got an 85-year-old sister that lives there, and let me tell you, I was in the country of Panama, and I was terrified because she lives alone. So we do have that fund that's been set up that I think will come in handy in case of an emergency. FEMA has also changed how they're doing business today, to help the different states and counties when we have those issues. So, the state, the federal government, and local government are working together to try and come up with better ideas on how to handle all of that. Last but not least, and I saved this one for last because it hits my heart, and that's the Lakewood Ranch Library. Doctor, I agree with you. I sit back and I can tell you that there's been a lot of discussion that I've been involved in on the library in Lakewood Ranch at Premier. I can tell you, I'm looking at an email now that was sent to Sue Miller, I believe, and it shows, the biggest library that we have is one of the first that was ever done in Manatee County, the Central Downtown Library. It's 51,700 square feet. The next one to that is Braden River in my district, and that's 15,000 square feet. And the rest of them under that are smaller. We're looking to build this library at 24,000 square feet. So it will be the second largest when built in the county of Manatee. We are doing that with the hopes, of course, that we will also, the main theme here is to make sure that we can staff it. Because believe it or not, that takes a lot of money to staff a library like that. So I'm with you, and I'm very excited about the Friends of Lakewood Ranch and what they're doing, and I am really hoping that there'll be a lot of contributions made in that regard to help us. And when I say us, I mean the residents in the general area that will be using this library. I will be one of them, to make it successful and what we want it to be. I'm sitting here looking at an email that was sent to Sue Miller, who has really been working hard on this, her and her volunteers that she's working with. And, I think we're heading in the right direction. We're not moving as quickly as perhaps everybody would like. I understand that. And probably the hardest thing for me to learn when I first got elected, and still sometimes even today, is that, when it comes to local government, it's slow. It's slow. I am truly hoping that by the end of this year that we'll have design. I'm looking at the county administrator here, who she gets tired of talking to me about it, I can tell you. But I do hope that we'll have a design that we can look at and kind of work together to make sure that the library is very successful. I do know that there's a lot of people in the surrounding areas, not just in Lakewood Ranch, but in Myac, Creekwood, Terra, all the areas there that will be using this library. It's not just Lakewood Ranch that will want to help financially set this up. And one of the things I am looking forward to, by the way, is the bookstore. I know that Sue, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, and I can see this being set up in some capacity. I don't know how we do it yet. I've not spoken to the administrator on this. But, I would think that would be something that probably, locally volunteers could put together and possibly take care of. I say that in looking at the administrator and smiling. But these are things that we are working toward. And right now, my biggest thing for me, I think 24,000 square feet is half of what, of course, I know some of the friends of the Lakewood Ranch Library wanted. But at the same time, my concern right now is let's get it built. Let's get the people in it staffing. Let's get the volunteers in there working. And if it's that big of a success, then you know what? Nobody's going to stand in the way of expansion.
Right.
So, but we got to crawl before we walk. And let's make sure it's going to be something that all will appreciate and enjoy, which I'm sure it will, by the way. I have no doubt. So that's kind of where I stand on it, and I'm kind of, I'm up here. I'm a Lakewood Ranch resident. I live in the country club. I'm close to where this library is going to be built. Yes, sir, I'll be using it. But at the same time, I sit up here and I have to look at the funds that are available and put aside to build this library and handle. And so I do think definitely that our county administrator is doing a phenomenal job in trying to put this together. And any way I can help, please let me know, ladies. And Doctor, please let me know. I'm at your disposal. But I think we're moving in the right direction. I wish we could move faster. That's my only issue. Thank you, Mr.
Trace.
Mr. Chairman.
It's a very good discussion, but we have a balanced budget in front of us. I think this is something we'll decide on next year, but we do have a lot of large projects coming up. I would hate to give y'all money back and then have to take it back in 2 or 3 years. We have stormwater. We have sea level rise. We're going to have to staff a new pool at Lincoln. We're going to have to staff a new library. We're trying to get our libraries back open on Mondays.
Right.
We are back, basically, still have less employees than we did in 2007, and I think we have 80,000 more people. So we are continuing, trying to get our level of service up. So, yes, we, are kind of slow increments, but I think in the next couple of years, I think so, if things keep going, that we would be able to give some money back. But Jan, we have three motions. Do we need to make them separately, or can we make them all together?
Yes, ma'am, if you would make them separately, I would appreciate it.
All right, I move to adopt Resolution B 20-001.
Second.
Okay, got a
This
motion.
moves it to
Say the whole thing.
I move to adopt Resolution B 20-001 for tentative millage rates for fiscal year 1920. There's three motions here,
Second.
step process.
okay?
Carol seconded. Commissioner Benak?
Do the motion.
Can I,
Well, go
wanna-
ahead. I
you
think
wanna-
you want to keep making motions, go for it.
Well, we need to
Oh,
vote.
okay.
We gotta
we have to
vote
vote on them
individually.
individually.
You have to vote on them.
Okay, we gotta vote.
Do you want to vote? Or
I was just going to respond to some of the comments I heard too, you
Do you
know.
want to vote for all three and then comment?
Okay, why don't we vote on them, then we'll open it up for some more comments. So we've got a motion by Commissioner Trey, seconded by Commissioner Whitmore, on motion A, I'll call it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That passes 5-0.
Move to adopt Resolution B 20-002, which adopts the tentative budget for FY 1920, which also includes the unincorporated municipal service taxing unit and the Palm Air Municipal Service Tax Unit.
No,
That's on my action requested.
yeah, B.
Mine
I have
shows.
three of them.
I'm sorry.
This just moves it to.
You're right.
It's a tentative
Second.
budget.
Second.
Did you second it, Carol?
Yes, I seconded it. Got it?
Okay, Carol seconded.
Okay, good, Vicky?
Yep.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Trey, seconded by Commissioner Whitmore. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 5-0.
Move to adopt Resolution B 20-003, which adopts the tentative budget for FY 1920 for all identified Manatee County dependent special districts.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Trey, seconded by Commissioner Whitmore. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. Let's see, what else? I think that's,
Just our comments and then 8.
ounce millage rate comparison.
She did that.
Did you already do that, Sharon?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Commissioner Benak.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to some of the comments that we heard, and specifically about storm shelters. He's not wrong, it's an issue. We have a new report that shows a deficiency of storm shelters in Manatee County. Previously, we had more than enough, according to the old study. And that is why the school board did not have to harden their schools, because we had a surplus. Now we don't. Now we have a deficiency. But guess what? There's no planned new schools that I'm
Already
aware of.
done it.
Because they got them in before it was required.
Of course.
However, the state has changed how we have to pay for sheltering. And I think that is part of the reason why we're setting aside a disaster fund, right? Because we have to come up with the funding before the school board had to cover that. So yeah, there is
You're
the
right.
need for that, working together very closely with the school board, and we will continue to do that. But that is an issue that does require funding, so I have
Forgot
to
about
continue to look at that. I heard a couple things. One thing about the Lakewood Ranch Library, I'm very excited about it, but I was kind of confused about the talk about having philanthropy. I
can talk about it.
agree 110%, but I will tell you, we have an incredible library foundation.
Yeah.
They have funded some incredible programs that have so improved our library system. So I don't know if they're
That's what we're
working
talking
on this.
about.
I mean, because we do have an incredible library
Probably gonna have
foundation.
one
I
out
hope
there.
you will work with them.
We
Sherry,
also
did
have
you?
the Friends of Lakewood Ranch.
Yeah,
that's
I can,
working on
I
it.
can comment on it. I believe what he was talking about was something that we have been asked on several different projects, not just the library, but also the Lincoln Pool, other building, animal services building, is that we need to have a policy about philanthropic donations towards enhancing these new facilities. And I'd like to tell you that we're working on that. I talked with the county attorney last week about it, and we're putting together a set of policies and procedures that could allow that, but we need the board to talk about some of the parameters around that. So I think we're making that option available, and, thank you for mentioning that, because we have been approached about even some of our parks and preserves, people would like to enhance them, and we haven't had that ability in the past.
Absolutely. And we know we have big ticket items in this county. We know we're gonna need a new landfill. We're probably gonna need a no jail at some point. I mean, we have big ticket items. but I have to disagree with one thing that Mr. Meehan said. Said we can pay for CIP projects with revenue collected throughout the year. Nope, we gotta have the money in the bank beforehand. That's why you got this big fund. You've got to have the money for the capital improvement project in the bank. Has to be in the account. That's where a lot of that large number comes from. Now, you're not wrong. In the budget stabilization fund, which is excess over the 20% reserves, is over $50 million. That's what that number shows in that email that we got. So the fact of the matter is, there is quite a bit of money that is not designated, right? I'm not saying this wrong. That is not designated, but it isn't $600 million. I believe it's more around $50 million.
It's less.
So it's not saying that it's not a bad thing, but we certainly cannot pay over time for these capital improvement projects. They have to be funded up front. So I think I agree with what our chair said. We're in very, very good position, but we don't need to keep padding it. We need to look at having that fund and keeping our taxes at the right rate. And we're very fortunate that our values continue to go up. But there was a time where they didn't go up. And so we have to plan for that as well. So, thank you.
Real quick, I will never support increasing the fares to meet our $15 million losses in transit. These are the working poor and the elderly that use the transit. And I won't do that, so I would never support that. Also, our values, Jan, help me. I was here in office during the recession, and our property values went down. And have they reached what they were in 2000, when I first came, 6 or 7? Have they reached that now?
Yes.
And did they just this year or last year?
Actually, it was this 18, but a lot of that.
Last year.
Right. Again, you've got almost, I'm sorry, again, if I'm responding, you have almost, how many is the population increase?
80,000.
Yes.
9,200 people in 2018.
So 9,200 people in 2019. So even though you're coming back up, you should be a lot higher than where you are if you were matching where you were back then.
That's a lot because of the new homes, correct?
Correct.
And again, I want, Mr. Meehan is very passionate about this, but I do want our county to respond to his comments always. Because the last thing I want to hear is kind of, hopefully, where we're coming from and where you're getting your information from, and you're our professional that we rely on. So if you could respond to some of the things that may be correct or not correct, but I just think the public needs to hear both sides.
Okay. Are you wanting me to respond right now or respond? Okay.
I'm done.
One thing, Mr. Meehan and I have an appointment on Wednesday to go through and discuss so that we can clarify a lot of the numbers that he has and the difference. One of the things that I heard tonight that is very disturbing, there's a $600,000 number that's coming out of the financial, $600 million that's coming out of the financial statements. I just did a quick look just to see today what I see. And currently, in the $600 million, you've got $141 million of general government projects. That includes roads, everything else. That money is sitting there, but they're already obligated into contracts. So by law, we have to have those according to the clerk. On the utility side, you've got $249 million in projects that have been obligated and that are in process and going. So that money isn't something you can reduce because you've already got an obligation to it.
And utilities are sewers, water lines.
And landfill.
Landfill, okay. And then, so you got about 100 million then.
I guess what I'm trying to say is there's quite a bit more to what's inside the numbers than just thinking that those numbers are in a bank account and there's nothing attached to it or what we're doing with it. Okay. And that's what I'm hoping to talk with Mr. Meehan about, and I believe Mr. Johnson's going to be there with us.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Ball?
Yeah, I'm glad that the chairman will be in that meeting. Guys, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm not trying to, I'm not talking about Mr. Mahan. I'm not talking about anybody that's come before us tonight. But I do know the budget stabilization fund is not there to cover our cost. It is there in case of an emergency, just like we had before. The bottom line is, we could afford to give the residents a little bit of a break. And my point was, you know what, we're looking at these two other taxes that'll be coming up that we'll be discussing soon. They are necessary items. I'm not taking away from them in any way. But it just seems like to me that there's a way that we could help the citizens, you know, before we hit them with two more revenue sources that we need, you know, but we could certainly do it if we chose. So that was my point. So please, thank you for indulging me. That was my point. Thank you.
Okay, next item is just the announcement that the next public hearing on the budget will be September 17th at 6 PM here at the Commission Chambers. Seeing nobody else, I close the public hearing on the budget, and we are adjourned.
Woo-hoo.